Alright, so everyone, welcome inside the Hiram Walker & Sons Distillery on the production floor. Today we're about to open up a tank and show you some of the whiskey making process. So we're standing in between all these really big tanks. We have 39 of these tanks in total. These are our fermentor tanks. So what happens inside is we actually make our base alcohol inside these tanks. Now before we even get to this part, a few other things happen first. Number one, we receive grain, 10 to 15 trucks full of grain every single day. They will pump the grain to the top of this building and we mill the grain into a grain flour. We mill corn, rye, wheat, and barley separately, and then we will add water and enzymes, and we will cook the grain at a high temperature, and we will cook that grain into mash. And mash is what is going to fill up each and every one of these tanks. You can see the silver pipeline. It's going to deliver about 190,000 liters of mash into each and every one of these tanks. And then one of our operators is going to come out and add a box to 2 boxes of yeast into the tank, and the yeast will begin the fermentation process. I'm going to open up this tank. When I open it up, you're going to hear a hissing sound. You're going to see a lot of cloudiness escaping from the tank. That cloudiness is CO2, carbon dioxide. Alright, so as you can see there, a lot of that cloudiness coming from the tank. We're going to let that fully clear out before it's safe to look inside. But I'll explain what you might expect to see when you're looking in the tank. So today, we're looking at a tank and we're seeing the early stages of a corn grain mash turning into alcohol. So as I mentioned, our operators at the distillery will pitch 2 boxes of yeast into the solution, and that's going to kickstart fermentation, where the yeast converts the sugar into alcohol. So right now, looking at this tank, we are about 24 hours into the process since we have added our yeast. Now corn grain has a lot of starch, a lot of sugar, so that means it takes a long time to fully ferment and turn all that sugar into alcohol. We're looking at about 72 hours almost, or roughly 3 days for that fermentation process to run its toll and to convert all the sugar into alcohol. So we opened up this particular tank because we're kind of right in the peak stage of fermentation. In a moment when that tank clears out and you get a chance to look inside, you'll notice a lot of active bubbling on the surface of the mash. That bubbling, that's a good sign for us. That means we have a really nice, healthy, active fermentation. It means we're making a lot of alcohol, but we're only about a third of the way there. We're still going to let this ferment for another 24 to 48 hours to get all that sugar to make as much alcohol as we possibly can at this stage. Now the other thing you may notice inside the tank is you might see some mash falling into the tank from the top. We're actually not adding any more at this stage, but what we are doing is circulating what is in this big tank. The mash is circulated from the very bottom through a pipeline. Actually, Alex can point that silver pipeline out there. We're going to draw it out of the bottom and circulate it and pump it back to the top. And in that between stage, we're going to cool the mash down. We actually let Detroit river water flow into the building and cool down the pipes that transport the mash. Detroit river water being a little bit colder will cool down any of the hot processes and the pipes that run very hot at this distillery. We don't want to let this get too hot. If it overheats, it stresses the yeast and we can't continue to make more alcohol. So we need to make sure that this is at a moderate temperature. That it is very hot. It's not hot at all. It's roughly 30 degrees Celsius inside that tank right now. All that bubbling is CO2 and gas that's escaping and rising to the surface of the mash. That's one of the byproducts of fermentation. With fermentation, we create alcohol, we create carbon dioxide gas, and it also is a naturally exothermic reaction, so it gets quite warm in there, and that's why we need to cool the mash down to prevent it from overheating. Now, we're going to give you an even closer look at what is inside this tank. All right, everyone, Lily is going to be an honorary hire walker employee for us. She is going to step forward. She's going to lower the cup into the tank and get a nice full sample from the tank for us to look at today. Everybody, a big round of applause for Lily today, our honorary hire walker employee. So Alex is going to bring around the cup. He's going to give you a really close look. Even in the cup, you can still see the bubbling right on the surface. We're making alcohol even as we have that mash sitting in the cup there. Now you can kind of take a look at it. You can smell it. If you really wanted to, you can dip a finger in and give it a quick taste if you're feeling brave enough today. So the brewing process gets us to about 15 or 16% alcohol by volume. And then we take that beer and we distill it to a much higher strength. And that's where we're headed next. We're going to head to our column stills to see what the distillation process looks like and how that gives us a much stronger form of alcohol.